Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Words of Wisdom with RC and Shirley B. And we are here today to talk about things that happen in our childhood and how they affect us moving throughout our life. So Shirley was just sharing something with me. And by the way, welcome back from your vacation from your vacation. And Shirley was just sharing some things with me. So Shirley, I think I'm going to let you start today. If
Okay,
you're comfortable with that.
absolutely. Absolutely. What we were talking about is in my and not just my life, but also women that I have worked with and men that I have worked with over the years as a coach. I also worked as a psychiatric assistant in several hospitals where we did a whole lot of trauma work and identifying where the trauma is so that we can release it and be able to move forward from it. So, what I realized when I was a little girl, my dad left the day I was born. He took her to the hospital, dropped my brother off at my grandmother's, and left. Um, it's really interesting. There's a whole story behind all that, and there's a future story with that too, because part of my vacation was meeting the family of that father that I had never known. They never know I existed. I knew they existed. I did. They didn't know that I existed. So there was a not a reunion, but a union. But anyway, he left. My mother needed to have a husband, or she was told she was going to have to give up her children. And in the community that she lived in, there were people that were pushing men to her to find the right one that would marry her. And so my father, that adopted my brother and I, came into our lives when I was not even a year old. And what we were talking about was because of what happened to my mother. She was 22 years old. She had a 16-month-old child. She had a newborn. The man took her to the hospital and disappeared, literally. You know, very quickly thereafter, he sent her divorce papers and she divorced. And there was nothing like it is today. No alimony, no child support, no nothing. The man just disappeared off the face of the earth. And I know that to be true because I had met some family that were theirs, and they had no idea where he was. He just, it was gone. So, mom was not able to connect. She had postpartum depression, which went on for a very long time. And looking back on her, I can see at 22, oh my gosh, and being told you're going to have to give up your own children.
And
And
back then too, what year was that, Shirley? About, I'm sorry,
1945.
1945. Okay. Oh, that's right, because you were born the same year as my mom. So they didn't really have the treatment. There wasn't,
Nothing.
everything was mental illness back then, but it wasn't like, oh, it's okay, you have anxiety, or oh, you have panic attacks or depression, and we have treatment and counseling and we can talk this out. Back then, you were just pretty much labeled mentally ill and considered crazy. I mean, literally crazy. They didn't have, nobody knew what postpartum depression was. It was just, you couldn't,
You just weren't functioning. And my aunt, I had two aunts, and my grandmother really took over taking care of me and Nathan, my brother, um, because my mother was incapable, absolutely incapable for the longest time to really be able to take care of us. And but they had lives of their own too. And that was when I was about, I guess, 6 months old when they told her that, you're either going to have to find a husband or give your kids up for adoption. And like I said, my mother had a history of her own. She was a triplet, and her two sisters were given up for adoption because the family couldn't keep them, couldn't afford them. they would have been 8 kids in the family, and they just couldn't do it. And so my mother was the one that was left, and my grandmother had um, uh, postmortem
Postpartum.
depression. Yeah, postpartum depression. And so she also, like me, connected very strongly with her father, because her mother wasn't able to be nurturing. And she had older brothers and sisters. She was the youngest of the family that also helped to raise her. So giving up her babies was
Right.
not something she was ready to do. And so, she married.
Do you think
And
that postpartum was something that was common during that era? Because now you're coming out of
World War II.
yeah, World War II. I couldn't think of the war. I'm like, I couldn't think of the word. World War II. My mom was also born in 1945. My mom married young. She had my brother and I. So my mother had two children by the time she was 20. She suffered from severe postpartum and um, chronic depression. She was manic depressive because I remember as a little girl, sometimes I would open the bedroom door and peek in, and I would see her sitting in the corner rocking, like
Mhm.
just holding herself like this and rocking. And my brother and I are only 18 months apart, and I'm the oldest. So I'm wondering, is this something that because, we're talking about the baby boomers, and,
Yeah.
so many babies were born during that time. Was it too much for such young women? But then, when we go back in history, we look at women, if you want to go to Little House on the Prairie, if you weren't married with kids by the time you were 13 or 14, you were an old maid. So,
Yeah.
times have changed and each generation has its thing. So do you think that was a common theme during that
I
time?
think I possibly because women were very submissive
Hmm.
in 1945. And but I do think the fact that my father had been away, um, she thought, working on the gas pipe that was going across the country. And she planned that when he came home and they got back together again, he talked a lot about going out west, and they were going to leave, and they were going, he built all of this up like everything was fine. And when he got home, he came home basically to tell her he was leaving her. It wasn't I mean, she knew it. He told her he was leaving her. And when she tried to stop him, she fell down the steps. And that's when he took her to the hospital because she went into labor. And then she was in labor for 23 hours. And in those days, if she wasn't given anything. I was breech birth. I was double breech, means I was folded in half and I came out behind first. So I think for my mother, it was, I don't know if it was common in the time or not, which it may have been, but I just think all the circumstances surrounding, you know. Now, I'm a little weird, people, just to understand this. I believe, I know from my experience and all the work that I have done that I was very much wanted while I was in utero. I felt that I've had work that I've done that has brought me to that place, and I know that I was very, very much wanted. My mother was excited to have me. She didn't know it was a little girl. We didn't know those things then. But she was very excited to have this child. That energy that I always felt from her was a lot of love. I just felt it. It was there. There was no disconnect. But evidently, from everything that happened, the falling down the steps, being breech birth, and it was a hard birth for me too, and I've been through that one also. And it was horrible. It was a horrible birth for me because I was strangling because I couldn't get me out. And
The cord, umbilical cord around your neck, because that's what I'm seeing. I don't know why I'm seeing that.
Yeah, that was happening. And because my head was facing upward, my feet were up, my head and my feet are like this. So my head was down, my feet was like this. And my behind was,
Born a yoga expert.
yeah, I was, you would think by now I should be perfect. Maybe that's why I would get dizzy when I do yoga. I don't know. But
That's
anyway,
very, very traumatic. I know my brother was breech,
mhm.
and that was kind of, I want to say, um, no blame, no shame, and all the way around. But I want to say that I really think that's what triggered my mom and my dad as well. He was an engineer. He traveled the world. He was away a lot of the time. My mom was a young mother with two small children. And my dad, he sometimes would go away 5, 6 months at a time. Even when I was a little girl, I remember my dad like being away. I remember the heater broke and my mom saying, he's never here when I need him. You know how you have those moments. So I'm going to assume that your mother must have had similar type feelings, especially
Oh,
being pregnant and, knowing like, is somebody going to be here to drive me to the hospital, and
well, he had planned. I mean, he planned to come home, and she was waiting on him to come home, and it was when he came home. And she didn't know. She obviously knew he was leaving, but she was certainly not prepared for him to drop her off at the hospital, drop my brother off at my grandmother's and leave. She wasn't prepared at all. I mean, she's 22. My father, by the way, I got to say this too. My father was 22 years older than her.
so there's a huge age difference.
Yeah, big age difference. And he had done this once before with another family, and we didn't know that at the time. But
There were,
anyway,
then there were this was there your father had three families, one before
yes.
yours, and then the one with your half
With,
sister.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
So I have a brother, a biological full brother. I had, because everyone's passed now, I had a half brother and two half sisters. But I have not met any of them, but fortunately connected with the family, and I have met with my niece and my son, my brother-in-law, and a couple of nephews that were from those different families. So yeah, it's all good. But it wasn't always all good. And that's the point, because to I was colicky as a baby. They could not find a formula for me. In those days, you mixed your own formula. You didn't get it in
I mixed
a
formula.
bottle.
I
Okay. You mixed your own formula. So they kept on trying to find a formula that would work for me. And it took them quite a while to do that. And so they were always worried that I was going to just evaporate because they couldn't get me to keep food in. And that may well have been from the breech birth, the trauma of the breech birth, the trauma that my mother was. I mean, I remember vividly being a baby, laying in bed. And again, a lot of this vividness comes even more so because of the work that I've done. And I've worked with hypnotists and things like that to really garner what really was going on. But being a baby, living in a crib, um, they had a little dog. He was a blue dog. It was a stuffed dog that had an elastic band around him. And my bottle would be put in that. And I would lay there on my side drinking my bottle, especially if there was no other adult in the house. If it was just my mother, that she did enough to give me that, and that was the best that she could do. Um, sometimes my aunts would come over, and then they would bathe me and do things like that with me. And we think those things are like, well, you don't have memories until you're this age or that age. But the reality is that we may not have memories that we can put into words, but the body has memories. the body holds on to it. When a child is sitting shivering in a crib because she's wet and her clothes are wet and her blankets are wet and nobody is coming, the body has memories and body holds on to that. And we need, I was probably in my late 30s before, actually almost probably my early 40s before I stopped taking scalding hot baths. And that had nothing to do with being cold on the outside. It had everything to do with feeling cold on the inside. And I came to realize that child was still shivering. She was cold. And the way that I would nurture that part of me was
Mm.
to take these hot, hot, hot baths and just immerse myself. So almost like a cocoon, immerse myself in a hot bath. And doesn't mean that my life was, crazy. No. I just learned how to deal with some of the things that my body was telling me that I still hadn't had all the clues yet as to what they were about.
So just a quick review. So we have a young mother that's 22 years old,
Mhm.
an infant. And how old was your brother?
16 months when he left.
All right. So you're 16 months apart, a young mother.
Hmm.
Husband comes home, tells her he's leaving. There's so much trauma in that statement alone.
Yeah.
Okay. And now you explaining what your memories from, I don't have, anybody knows me knows I'm horrible with time, and I don't always have a lot of childhood memories, and
I didn't either.
a lot of photos were lost during there was a fire in my mom's house. Um, but I have a memory from when I was in a stroller. I don't remember how old I was, and
Mhm.
my aunt used to babysit me. And at the time, she didn't drive. She was a teenager because my father was the oldest of eight. And she used to babysit me. And she used to push me in the stroller around this. It was like a lake, more like a big pond, and used to be ducks and geese down there. And she used to take me down there and push me in the stroller. And that is one of my few early childhood memories because I, if I was in a stroller, I probably wasn't walking because they would have made me walk.
Sure they would.
Shirley's like 15 or 16 years old, so she wasn't carrying my ass anywhere. So, but that is one of the few, like one of my earliest childhood memories. And when I asked my aunt about it, she says, I don't remember it. She said, but then she named, the park and what the lake. She goes, it had to be that lake because it was the only one within walking distance. I said, well, I remember you taking me there to see the ducks. I remember the stroller. I remember the white like little patent leather shoes with the little white bows on them. She goes, I
Yes.
can't believe you remember that. I said, I do. I said, I was even a shoe whore back then. So it's
And
really interesting how like just just the few things that you already mentioned, there's trauma, 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 trauma.
yeah.
And then
And I
a
think
traumatized mother trying to take care of her children the best she can, being told, we can't help you anymore.
yeah.
You didn't have social services back then like we do now. So now you need to find yourself a man, and you need to find yourself a man quick or you're going to lose your children.
That
And
was about
it's someone that comes from a family with a history where children had to be put out for adoption before. So there's a trauma to even before the trauma, there was trauma,
there was
right?
always trauma. Yeah, there was always trauma. And that's the thing. And the beauty of, and I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do a podcast on this is because I really want people to know that we can come through these things. There are professionals out there that work with people now today that have these situations. But some of the symptoms, sometimes we don't even know. We think that we have cleared it. We know what happened. We get the information and we think that we've cleared it. But the most important thing is that we don't always clear it just because we have the mental information and the maturity that comes with saying, you know what, my mom did the very best she could with what she had to work with. My stepfather, or by my adopted father, the father that adopted me, was a very sick man. I dealt with that. Um, the father that left, yeah, very, who the hell does that to your kids, and then do it twice. Come on now. Um, he had to be a very sick man. And hey, I'm not dead. I made it through, you know. So we rationalize that, look, I'm okay. I have a career. I'm doing the things I want to do in my life. I've got 4 kids. Life is good, right? But the reality is that we haven't healed. Intellectual understanding coming from a mature mind, all right, is not healing. It's just information. And so what happens is you attract people into our lives that are going to trigger. And this is at the time, it doesn't feel like a gift, but it is a gift because it's going to trigger all this emotion that's been built up over a lifetime. And you don't understand why. It makes you feel frightened. And I'll tell you, it also makes you feel insane. You begin to wonder what is going on with me.
And what about your sense of security?
Well, when you feel insane, you don't feel secure, for sure. And you don't know who to talk to or how to talk to about it.
Or who to
And
trust? Who to trust because you've already learned to not trust whether you're aware of it or not. Because what we're
well,
talking about is so many different things on so many different levels because we're talking about the conscious and the subconscious kind of trying to process together, but not able to put the pieces together.
absolutely.
At
Absolutely.
at a young age and a child, and we're seeing this through a child's eyes. And then you're right, when we become adults, because I learned to understand as I got older why my mother behaved the way she behaved. I didn't understand at the time. I just felt like an abandoned child or an unloved child or whatever. And then there came a point in my life where I realized she was doing the best she could. And and we forgive. It doesn't mean that we ever stop loving. And there was
But we haven't, but the word that we really need is the word healing
exactly.
because
And
we healed.
I I I want to thank you for coming forward with your story because where we're going from here is something that I'm going to say takes strength, resilience, and a lot of work and a lot of healing
Hmm.
and the courage, especially to be on not a public platform, but a public platform that could be seen by the entire world. So before we go any further, I want to thank you because this is not something that a lot of people would be willing to share.
Well, when you come out the other side, and I feel, especially after my trip to California, I feel like I've gone full circle in so many ways, and I would like others to realize that there is hope, there is healing, there is absolute healing, and it's not a joke, and it's not fake, it's real. And you become more and more and more the whole person that you were meant to be, that whole person. And I say that in a way to say this. Every time a healing takes place, in the beginning, I'm always working at it. I'm going to see a therapist. I'm working with a hypnotist. I'm doing some soul work. I'm doing some, um, uh, deep meditation work. I'm doing some deep digging. Okay. And all of that has to happen. But then as time progresses and you're continuing in your life and you're continuing with meditation, you're continuing with opening up your heart, your body, your mind, your spirit, healing shoots up. It comes out of no place. You think, man, I have got it now. I am so in, I love life. Life is good. Man, I'm moving forward. And one day you're sitting in meditation and a picture pops up. And that picture reveals something to you that is beautiful. And it is a picture, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. It is a picture of something that some part of you needed to experience. Some part deep down inside needed to see that. Okay. And then more and more it happens. And it doesn't happen on cue. It doesn't happen because you're thinking about it. It happens because now you are an open person with an open mind, an open and a softened heart. And you have the space in you to feel and be shown more and more and more so that you can continue to heal in spaces you didn't even know needed healing. That's why I want to do this.
Sometimes spaces that we weren't even aware that existed.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And places that you thought I that one's I've done that one already.
Right. Yeah.
You
Well,
know, and
we
I have a good friend that says beneath every deep is a deep. So don't just think you're finished because you went so deep. You never know when that deep's going to get deeper and something else is going to come up. And I really appreciate that. I love when people share with me that you're just never finished. You never know,
right.
you know. And I consider myself a very spiritual person. I consider myself a a person who has come through a lot of grace in a sense, um, intuition, um, spirituality. And I don't mean religion, I just mean a deep connecting within myself. But I couldn't do that until a lot of that healing took place. That deep connection within ourselves is that essence of the universe that we came in here with. And we're all connected. And the more we do that, the more we realize, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and it ain't a train. It's not coming at you, and I loved something you said earlier when we were first just talking about, that it's things aren't being done to us, they're being done for us. And when we're going through it, it doesn't feel that way.
No, it doesn't. It does not feel that way at all.
It doesn't. And I want to say, because I don't want to make this a long, drawn out biography, but my mother did find a father for us children. And he he was much more interested in me than my brother. My brother he had very little to do with my brother. My brother was always a disappointment to him. Because my father was very macho and my brother was not. My brother was a tennis player. He was an ice skater. These aren't macho sports in my father's view.
Well, if you've ever done ice skating, it's pretty athletic.
I,
We have
not when you,
ballet and yoga, so
yeah, well, not like my adopted father was a prize fighter,
wow.
and he was Italian. He was a prize fighter. He was a featherweight champion, and that's what you do. That's macho. That's and my brother that wasn't my brother's bent. That wasn't his style, and it still isn't. My brother's going to be 80 this year, and he still plays tennis with guys 35 years old twice a week. So, I think that's macho, actually, but so he really had, Nathan was very studious, studied all the time. Um, he wanted to get ahead in life, and he did, and he has, and it's been wonderful. Um, but my dad, he just, they just didn't have that macho thing in common.
Well, one was very intellectual and the other one was more physical.
Absolutely physical. Yes. And but anyway, and my father adored me. And I got nurtured by him. When my mother, up until this time, I still had not had that sense of connection, even though my aunts were there, but they would in and out. They weren't like always there. And my grandmother was a very stoic Russian woman. So if you can picture a very stoic Russian woman, you know, we don't even laugh. Well, she did laugh sometimes, but she had a hard life too.
Yeah.
So it was like, get over it. We don't talk about that. Get over it, period. And so nobody talked about what happened to my mother. If it weren't for a few stories that my mother told me once I found out, I would know nothing because nobody talked about it. I wasn't even supposed to know that I was adopted until
Talked about anything back then.
nothing, nothing. It's
Everybody had
over.
Leave it to Beaver, June Cleaver for a mother,
Yeah,
and yeah.
even worse than that.
Yeah.
Because I raised my kids on June Cleaver and Leave It to Beaver. So it was even worse than that then. Gosh, we didn't even have television. But beside that, yeah. So because he was my nurturer, and I really, really loved him. And he worked nights. Um, we lived in a town that was known for nightclubs and bars, restaurants, hotels, boardwalks, and all kinds of illegal stuff too. Okay, going on in the 40s, and my father was a part of one of the nightclubs, and so he worked nights and was home during the day. And so when I was a little girl, I would get up in the morning and the first thing I'd do is run into the bedroom and climb into bed with him, and honestly, um, he had a very hairy chest, and I just loved just nuzzling and nuzzling. I'd go in, like, get into that bed and like nuzzle, and he would just wrap his arms around me and love me, and I adored him.
So do you
Absolutely.
remember how old you were at that time?
Well, I mean, I know mom used to take me, you know, eh, she would get up in the morning, she'd be downstairs. I was little. I mean, I was like 2 years old or whatever, very, very little. And he would hold me, by the time they got married, I mean, he was part of my life very early on. But by the time they got married, I think I was two. And because she had a promise to church she would raise us Catholic, and there was all kinds of stuff going on with that because we weren't Catholic, we were Jewish. So, and there was a lot of hubbub about, you know, him marrying a Jewish woman with two kids.
Yeah, because most Italians are very Catholic. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yes, yeah, and Italian, and Italians marry Italians. I got news for you,
Well, no,
or at least at that time they did.
yeah.
Jews married Jews and Italians married Italians, and you didn't mix it up. Well, my mother's family was a little bit different. My aunt married an Italian also. But I say all of that because what I realized later, as I got older, is that the nurturing that my father did with me was not the healthy kind of nurturing. And it was very physical. It was very physical. It was never painful, but it was very physical, and it was inappropriate. And the way I responded to him as a child um, was not healthy either. Okay. I didn't know that. What do I know? All I know is we loved each other, and being physical with each other, being naked with each other was how we showed that love for each other. And because it was never painful, I never gave it a second thought. But we
But
moved.
that was the responsibility of the adult. You were a child. I mean, all childhood behaviors are learned.
Absolutely. And I didn't I I fully knew. I fully in my being knew that he loved me. At least that was my belief. And so when I was 8 or 9 years old, well, when I was 8 years old, we went to visit some friends of ours and out of town. My father didn't go, my mother and brother. I was a chubby little girl by then. That little skinny baby that couldn't find food was no longer skinny. And we had to go to Philadelphia to get my clothes. And when we did that, we visited with the friends of the family. And outside, there's this little old lady. She had a babushka. She was a Jewish lady. They were all dressed in black with these, and she was wearing her babushka. And she took my hand and she introduced me to all of her friends that were sitting outside they sat outside on the street, you know, in front of their houses.
On
And
this, that's a common Philadelphia thing.
yes,
Everybody sits on their stoop and talks
yes,
every evening
every,
after dinner.
yeah. So, and she took my hand and she introduced me as her granddaughter to these people. And so I thought she was crazy. The little old lady is really nuts. So anyway, we left there and we were on the train coming back to where we were going from there because we didn't live in Philadelphia. And I said to my mother, that little old lady is crazy. She said, what little old lady? And I told her which one. And she said, why do you say that? I said, well, she introduced me to her friends as her granddaughter. And for the first time ever, I saw something in my mother's eyes I had never seen. And to this day, I can't tell you exactly what it was. There was pain. There was there was sadness for sure. There were tears just brimming because mom was very stoic also. She didn't cry. And she hugged me. And I mean hugged me. And I never felt that from her before. And
Your grandmother from your biological father?
this, yes, yes. And I said to her, and she said to me, she said, Shirley, she is your grandmother. Well, that didn't make any sense because I knew who my grandmother was. And I knew that my father's mother was dead, you know. So there was no way that she could be my grandmother. And then she said, your father is not your father. And honestly, but bold as can be, I looked at her and I said, well, I would have thought if anyone wasn't my parent, it would have been you, not daddy. And she said, but you can't tell him you know, because it would break his heart. And
But he, in a sense, was the only father you
he
ever
was
knew.
yeah, the only father I'd ever known.
Right.
And it really at 8 years old, I had difficulty wrapping my head around all of that. But we keep secrets. That's one of the hallmarks of trauma. That's one of the hallmarks is that we keep secrets. Now, I can't say anything to him about this because it would hurt him terribly if he knew that I knew and that my brother knew that we were adopted. So I don't say anything. I just hold that. And in fact, if anything, I don't know what the story is at this point. I have no idea. She's not talking anymore. She said what she was going to say. She shuts it down. She, sits by the window, watches the scenery go by. And we moved that year to a new neighborhood. And the neighborhood I had lived in was very much predominantly Italian, and everybody knew everybody. Everybody for years. It was not something that there were no newcomers in the neighborhood. Okay.
Yeah. The neighborhoods have changed, that old fashioned kind
That,
of homey,
absolutely. So we moved
everybody's
neighborhood,
business. Yeah.
right. So we moved to an area outside of the city, like a suburb. And so I got to meet people of many different nationalities, different, just very different than me, different from what I was used to. And I got to experience girls with their fathers. And intuitively, I knew that their relationships with their fathers were very different than mine with my father. And I felt sorry for them. I,
That's
I,
interesting.
yeah, I felt sorry for them that they didn't have the kind of relationship with their daddies that I had with mine. But I could see it was that closeness was not there, you know. So by the time I was about 9, I had been living there for a year or so and engaging and spending nights with these girls, overnight things and stuff like that, having dinners with them and everything. And somehow or another, I once again intuitively knew that because I was seeing it in many different households, that what we were doing was not normal.
It was different.
And so I, I wanted to tell him because I really thought he did not know, because he loves me and he would never do anything to harm me. So I did not know. Okay, so uh, that we live by a bay, and we would often take long walks to the bay and sit on one of the docks and dangle our feet. And so one day we did that, and I figured I need to tell him because he doesn't know, you know. And I told him, and and he got very upset with me. He got angry with me. He put his hands on my throat, and he told me that I could never stop him from doing that because I had always let him. It was my fault. I had always let him, and I can't stop now. And then he got up and he walked away, and he started doing this jog like you would if you were a prize fighter, just kind of jogging along. And I couldn't catch up with him. He wouldn't let me catch up with him. And so I made a decision that day that I don't care what he asked me to do. I could not lose his love. You talk about being safe. That was my safety blanket right there. It didn't matter. I would do anything not to lose his love, you know? So again, these things imprint. I can tell you what, I could go through this life story. I used to be able to go through it. Fortunately, today I can go through it without getting connected because all of that stuff isn't there. But I
Cut
used to go through it.
cords now.
Pardon me?
You've cut those cords now.
Yes. There are no, the triggers aren't there, at least as far as I know.
That's how you
More
know.
will be revealed.
That's how you know when you have healed something, when you can talk about it without feeling the trauma from it.
But there's another way you can do that too, and it's called dissociation.
Yes.
So for years after all of the trauma, because there was a lot of trauma that went on until I was 18, from 9 to 18, with him. But I once I was able to talk about it, which came after I was 18 years old, I didn't tell anyone until I was 16, and then I had to live with them for 2 more years until I graduated high school. Another story. Um, but you, through that process, once you know something isn't right and you are forced into doing it, you have the psyche is wonderful. You can dissociate. You don't have to be there while it's all going on. And there was a lamppost outside my father's bedroom. And I used to go into that lamppost and sit in the light and in the heat of that lamppost until I heard him say, okay, go to your room. And then I would go to my room. So I could talk about it because I didn't have to feel it what was going on because I had dissociated and I could talk about it from that level. So I thought it didn't bother me. But the whole point is it does bother us. The body is so powerful. The body holds the memories. The body holds the fear. The body holds the anger. The body holds the disappointment. And until we become courageous enough to reach out to people that can help us deal with that, yes, you can talk about it from here, from that place of dissociation. But wholeness, healing, and what happens? Let me tell you, you find other people just like that person because you're going to do it different this time, you know? And then the next thing you know, you're married to that person. And you act the same way as you did before. You become very submissive, even though you think, no, no one's ever going to get me again. I've got this thing. But the body responds and you feel crazy. And then they tell you you are crazy. And then you feel even more crazy.
What was your mother's reaction? Did your mother ever know?
I tried to commit suicide twice. And the second, neither time, obviously it didn't work. Hi, guys, I'm here.
Glad you weren't successful.
Yeah. Um, the first time was with razor blades. And my brother caught me. My mother and father were both out, and I was upstairs crying. My brother had friends downstairs, and I was upstairs crying. By the way, I also liked alcohol a lot as a teenager. That was one of my other ways of dealing with this was drinking alcohol. And I was very proud of myself because I could drink a lot of it and not, I thought, get drunk. I thought I was I used to call myself a really good drinker.
No,
Uh,
it's escapism.
yeah, it's a way of escaping.
Would be
Absolutely.
normal behavior under the circumstances, especially at such a young age. And that was something that was easily accessible to you.
Absolutely. We had a bar in the house. Everybody had a bar in their house in those
Hey,
days.
Italian bar, definitely.
Right, right. So anyway, I was in he had friends downstairs, I was upstairs, and I was crying, and I guess I was making too much noise, and he came upstairs, and I had been drinking. Um because it was no big deal. I was 16. It was right after my 16th birthday. No, I'm a liar. It was just before my 16th birthday. And I started wanted to cut my wrist. And he came up and saw what I was doing and got angry with me and told me that I was crazy and you don't need to do that kind of shit and one thing and another and took it away from me and got me band-aids and and I think
Do you know why?
no, 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 he had no idea.
Met
And
your
he
brother
didn't.
once, and he has a very strong personality. I think your brother
Yeah.
had
And the thing is, he didn't know for many years. He did not know for many years. Right after I turned 16, he graduated from high school and moved. He got out. He said, I'm not staying here anymore. And he went into the Navy. He's a self-made man. He's amazing. He really is. But but he didn't know. And anyway, so I had tried to do that. And then I went through another trauma. This guy that I had been dating went into the service and had gone overseas. He was in Philippines, and I was having this big sweet 16 party, and he sent me a letter and broke up with me.
Oh,
And said he found somebody else and he loved her and he was going to get married to her and blah blah blah. So that didn't help me any. Anyway, after my sweet 16 party,
up your teenage years.
huh?
Those are hard enough years anyway, the teenage years for a
Yeah,
girl.
they were. And my father was very possessive of me. So any boy that came to the house got the third degree, and some of them never came back a second time.
I say how many got scared away.
He was a formidable person. He was, yeah, you
Well,
know,
he was a boxer. I'm sure he had quite a presence, large presence about him.
he did. And so, but anyway, then my father would my father would send my mother to the store to get cigars at night when he first woke up from because he's going to go to work, right? So and he would say, okay, it's time for you to go, I need you to go to the store and get me a couple of cigars. And mother didn't drive, and the store was like 8 blocks away. And then he would call me upstairs after she left. And that went on from the time I was 9 until I was 16. So, and that's a whole other level of stuff that I don't need to get into.
Right.
But, I felt trapped all the time. I really did. And then mother started working weekends and I wasn't allowed to leave the house until I cooked him breakfast in the morning. So, I just felt really trapped. And anyway, and he would not, I would say to mom, I'll go. Oh no, you know how your father is about you walking out there in the dark and being out at night. No, 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 you stay here. No, I'm going. So this one night he called downstairs to her and he said, I need you to go get my cigars. And I said to her, I'm going. And she said, no, 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 you know how your father is. He's not gonna, I'm gonna get hell if I let you go. And I said, I'm going. But I had a plan. The streets we lived in like a subdivision, and it was new, that kind of stuff being outside of the city, so there were no lights on the streets. There were lights in your subdivision, but when you went down the streets they didn't have lights, and it was a straight walk down to the little store that was there. And I put on a black jacket and I put on a black hat and I put the collar up and I thought, I'm going to close my eyes and walk down this road. And I'm going to get hit by a car and I'm going to die. So I walked down that road. There wasn't a freaking car on that road.
Well, I'm glad about that.
I And then I said to myself, so what do I do? Do I buy his, cigars? Should I come back empty-handed? I'm not buying his cigars because I'm going to walk the other way and I'm going to get hit by a car. I mean, somehow or other, I've got to die tonight. I don't want to live. I don't want to live anymore. Sure enough, I walked all the way back. I didn't buy his cigars. I walked all the way back. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I mean, this is insane. Nothing. I know now divine intervention. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here. But when I got home, I thought, what do I do? What do I do now?
Yeah.
And so I went and told my mother. And so my mother told me to go in the closet and hide until he leaves. So he got up, got dressed. Where are my cigars? Oh, I didn't go, she said. Where's Shirley? Oh, she went over to Mary Jane's. Why is she there? Because she wanted to go out. I don't like her out. And there was this big argument ensued, and he left. And then she called my aunt. My aunt came and got me, brought me to her house. she, I told, she told her what was going on. Long story short, because I had to go to my godfather, I had to tell him everything. My godfather disowned me. Uh, my mother told me it was time for me to come back home. I came back home, and she said, uh, your father said he was sorry. He won't do it again. And he wants to know if he can stay. And something inside of me just went clang, like 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 a steel door closing. So you talk about safety. There was no safety.
No.
There was no safety. And because if I and in my mind, I thought, if you have to ask, then the answer is yes, he can stay. I know that. I know that. I don't you don't ask someone who has just told you this if he can stay. So I knew that there was no safety, you know. So and I will say that the next 2 years that I had to live with him until my mother and I till I graduated high school, um, he never laid a hand on me again. But we fought constantly. I mean, there was so much anger and hate in me. We just fought all the time. Anytime he was in my presence, I fought with him. I threw things at him. I treated him like shit. Um, and I was all this anger just kept, you know, out, 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 out. And but there was never. We think you need to see a doctor. We think you need to talk to someone. Do you want to talk to the priest? Do you need somebody to? It was like that was it. We
Like,
will never discuss. We
yeah,
will never.
happened.
Yeah, we will never discuss it again. Um, so there's so much more to this story, and I don't want to take up all of our time in this story, but what I want to talk about is there are so many ways that we justify, we dissociate, we drink. Today we drug. Then we drug too. I didn't drug. Having been around hotels, nightclubs, restaurants, cocktail lounges, bars, I saw enough of what drugs did. And my mother said, don't just, you can drink as much as you want, Shirley, just don't do dope. Don't do dope. And I was scared to death about dope. You look like you're frozen, my friend.
Actually, you
I
look
think you think I'm frozen, so I don't even know if it's thing.
it's
You
recorded.
are.
Yeah,
It's recording.
it,
Uh,
yeah.
but
The internet connection isn't, it's telling me it's
yeah,
stable. We've been just a little over an hour, right about an hour.
right.
Go
So
ahead and
I just,
finish
yeah,
off.
I'd like to, you know, if anybody that's watching relates to anything that I'm saying, my hope for you is that number one, even if it's over and done with, if you get triggered, if people, situations bother you, you have anger that you don't even know where it's coming from because that's not who you are. Um, you have excessive sadness because you know it, and you have no reason to be sad. You know, it doesn't mean that that's not okay. It is okay. But if you've had a trauma life, times in your life where you've experienced trauma, even family, even deaths, doesn't mean the kind of trauma that I had. Moving from place to place because maybe one of your family members is in the military. There are so many things that create trauma for children. Even with me, I felt responsible for everything that ever happened to me. And, when I was a little girl, I was telling you that, they used to tell me that, but they say to my mother and father, you've got to watch out for her. She's going to be a heartbreaker. Look at those bedroom eyes that she's got. Oh my God, I thought I was the worst thing in the world. All I wanted to do was to be wholesome. And when I was in my 30s, I got an afro. And people said, "Oh, I love it, Shirley. It's adorable. You look so cute." And I said, "Really? Do I look wholesome?" And that's all I wanted to do was to look wholesome, you know? And please seek help, please, you know? And if you want someone to talk to, you can reach me at Shirley Balman at on Facebook or message me. Reach out to uh, Robin. There are a lot of places where you can talk to someone, and then maybe if we can't be of service in the depth that you need,
Right.
we can direct you to some people that can,
And I
because you
think
have to live in trauma.
it's important to stress that these things that happen during our childhood are not our fault.
Not our fault. And
The
it's but the
child is
thing,
only doing what they feel pleases the adult. We are taught by the adults. They are our examples.
right, the thing about it is though that, and I had a friend, a mentor that worked with me. And because I would not, once I started working on this, I did not take responsibility. But what she said was, "I don't want you to take any responsibility for what happened to you, but I want you to look at what did you learn from it? What did you learn? What behaviors did you learn that you are still displaying that are no good for you anymore?"
I bet you were one hell of a people pleaser.
I was, oh heavens, yes, I was one, and I had a lot of these little personalities and I would go into a room and I would scan the room to see who, I mean, you talked once before about me being intuitive. I've been intuitive all my life. And this only enhanced it. I was hyper vigilant. So I would walk in a room and intuitively I'm scanning it. I'm looking at the people, I'm picking up their vibes, and I'm seeing which ones are going to be safe, or how do I have to be in this environment in order for me to be safe.
Right.
The worst part about all of this was I was disconnected from my emotions, other than sad, angry, hurt. I was disconnected to be able to truly feel love, feel compassion. I knew how to act it. I knew how to act compassionately. I knew how to act lovingly, but I couldn't feel it. And my current husband, who I've been with now for 30 some years, one day asked me when we first met each other and started talking to each other, he said, "Have you been in the theater?" And I said, "No." I said, "Why?" He said, "I don't know. I get this feeling about you that you've done plays and you've been in the theater." And I said, "No, but I've been on stage all my life." And that's the bottom line. So, if you find that maybe you're doing things like that, like, anytime, oh yeah, I know what, I know the personality that needs to come out for this event instead of the authenticity.
Right.
Because what the hell is authentic when you don't even know, right?
Right.
One thing we all want to do, that's what our life is about, is being authentic, being real, being able to love ourselves, embrace every part of my being, and get all these little pieces and parts out and being able to look at them and then love them and embrace them, as opposed to saying, "I don't want you here." No, you need to come up, you need to come out. I need to embrace you. I need to love you. There may be pieces and parts that I don't need anymore, and that's okay. But for the most part, in order to be whole and be authentic, we have to examine these areas. Otherwise, we're living from up here alone. So, okay, that's my story.
The amazing thing in all this is you are probably one of the most deeply compassionate people that I know.
And I appreciate that because it took me a long time to come to that place. I could act compassionate, but I didn't have the feeling of compassion.
Well,
And
you do.
again, I do. I
You
do now.
because that energy, like whenever, even when you enter a Zoom room or even if we're in a group, I can always feel your energy. Like if someone else is speaking and they're going through a difficult time, and you're a very good observer, you're listening, and you're also observing the behavior, and you have this ability to put the pieces together and really like help guide them through, but you do it in a very loving, kind, soft, gentle, and compassionate way. And that's the way I always explain your energy. That's the way it's a very, like, I really don't want to remember your chart at all. But I would say it's like a very Cancer, nurturing, mothering energy. And everybody says that about you. So I know I'm not crazy. And I don't even like throw the astrology book away. Just that's just who you are. It's
It
just
is.
are. And you know, I want to
Well,
say,
my moon is in Cancer.
well, there you go. Then
Yeah,
that's your
yeah.
emotion. So that's there, that's it. But I want to say that, and I'm not really quite sure how to word it. I'm not happy that you went through what you had to go through, but I love the person that you are now.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you know that I was thinking the same thing. I do not regret my past. And I don't shut the door on that past. I embrace it and I love every part of me. And I've come to places of forgiveness. That is, I don't talk about forgiveness because I don't ask anyone to forgive anybody. I tell them to release them and set them free so that you can set yourself free. Through that process, eventually you will come across them again, or you will have a thought about them and you'll see that you feel differently. And that's the feeling of forgiveness. And, you know, the only time I didn't do it that way was this last time that I put on to one of the other groups that we're in, because I knew in order for me to live fully, I needed to also forgive, not just release, but forgive. And the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, showed me how to do that this time. But I think I was prepared for it then. You know, it takes time. It takes time. I do want to say one little thing. Prayer and meditation, however you think about it, it's important. Connecting with your being, connecting with that light within us is what gives us the courage, the power, the strength, the compassion, and the love to continue to do the work, continue to move on, and to continue to help others to do the same thing. And that for me comes from meditation, all forms of meditation. And one day when I was meditating, I had an image. And in that image, I was walking through a back door of my adopted father's apartment. And this actually happened many, 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 many years ago. And I went there to show him that he didn't destroy me. That was my purpose many, many, many years ago. This was just like last year. In this image, in my meditation, I walked in. He was sitting across the room in his chair. And I looked at him and he looked at me. We made eye contact. And I saw a tremendous amount of love in his eyes. I did not see that. The 8-year-old that lived in me, that still lives in me, because where I felt it was right where she lives. That 8-year-old needed to see that she wasn't wrong. She wasn't wrong in believing for those first 8 years that he loved her. He did, but he was very, very sick.
Yes.
And that was the only way that he could feel or express love. And he was afraid she was taking that away from him, which she was. But that little girl needed to see the love in his eyes for her, because it was a surprise. He wasn't expecting me. I didn't see that many years ago when I walked into his apartment. I was just full of myself, and by golly, you didn't get me down, mister. Look at me, you know? But we never know when that kind of stuff is going to show up once we've done the work. More healing will be revealed.
Healing is a lifelong journey
And
because
I'm
we're always learning and healing and releasing and giving and receiving. We're in constant motion.
mm-hmm,
We're in
mm-hmm.
situation. I
Yeah.
want to thank you for sharing this.
Well, thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
glad.
for your bravery. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for being you. And thank you for, I want to say, doing this and reaching out and suggesting the subject because it can be somewhat controversial because neither one of us is an expert, a psychiatrist or a psychologist. So this is just your story that we're sharing, but you sharing this to possibly help someone and to help give them direction. This has happened to them because they might be having some of these flashbacks or emotions and not really know where they're coming from. I
Hmm.
know I suppressed
Hmm.
and my abuser, which I was very young. And I can't speak for the other person that was involved, but there was also another child involved. Um, and I pushed it down, but my grandmother knew by my behavior. My mother didn't want to acknowledge it until I was older. I was like 20 years old. And I was at the church getting ready to walk down the aisle. And my mother says, I have a surprise for you. And my abuser was the babysitter's husband, which they were kind of like grandparents to us because at the time we lived quite a distance from about an hour from my grandparents. But when you're little, it's far, far away, you know. So they used to babysit when my mom would work. And she opened the door, and I hadn't seen them. Oh, wow. I don't know how many years, but probably over 15. And but my mom used to still, they used to, it was when you still wrote letters, you know, you
Yeah,
still
right.
got it,
Yeah, got
you know,
it.
one line in the house, everybody heard your phone call. And she opened the door, and there they were, the husband and the wife. And I literally just went like I became paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I felt like somebody had sucked the air out of me. And
Right.
I I really don't remember, but you know, I remember like saying, get him out of here, get him out of here now. And my mom kept saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know, and of course now, like, you know, in 15 minutes, I have to walk down the aisle.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
one of those experiences. And I literally was in a total state of shock when I tell you I barely remember my own wedding. I barely remember my own wedding. That's how
That's,
traumatized I was. That's how triggered I was, and how that all hit me at one time. And the timing always, look, there's never a good time, but what timing?
yeah, absolutely. And I, that is what our bodies are so marvelous. Our psyche is so marvelous that you were able to literally go through with your wedding and
Total trauma. I was like a zombie.
not remember it, but you just go into that frozen position, you know, fight, flight, or freeze. We go into that frozen, but that doesn't mean we don't still, it isn't like we're frozen stiff, we're just standing there. No, you're going to go through everything. You're going to do it. You're going to do everything you need to do, but you're not going to
For
be
you,
there.
you're in a church with 200 people waiting for,
Yeah,
you know, your parents had this whole
yeah.
big, you
But
know, big
you
plan.
are, yep. And
Your
you're not.
trauma has nothing to do with the person waiting at the end of the aisle. It has to do with the abuser. So yeah, that was
That's the thing. The body and the psyche are amazing, and they do get us through a lot, but we can't live there. That's the important thing.
I do believe my mother suspected something because that was kind of like when we were yanked out of the home and sent to the farm,
Hmm. Well,
you know.
that's
So I
interesting.
believe that my mom, there were so many things going on at that time, you know, because my mom, like I said, was a young mother. I was like between 3 and 4 years old. Um, you know, and apparently this man was the neighborhood childhood molester is what he was. You know, when he used to
Fortunately.
have the old fashioned ice cream machine with the old rock salt, and he used to sit outside and he used to make ice cream for all the kids.
Yeah.
So he was everybody's grandpa. And
Yeah.
everybody thought he was the most wonderful man. But when you're 3 years old, you don't know how to verbalize. So you act out. So then I
Mhm.
became the uncontrollable child, you know.
Yeah. And like we
Very
both know,
a different story, but similar.
absolutely. But that's a thing, it
Like I
does.
knew it was wrong. Like immediately I knew it was wrong, like something moved through my body.
Hmm.
Just wasn't. And then I would try to avoid. And then when it would come time to go to the babysitters, I would throw myself on the floor. And my mom thought I was just, being
Temper tantrum.
exactly. I
Yeah.
was, why are you acting like this? I had to go to work. I have to go to work. Your dad's still, and at the time my dad had been away. He had been in Puerto Rico. Just my dad was an engineer. He built bridges and he was gone for like, I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 months at that time. So, and then in the summertime, we used to go to my grandparents every summer for a couple of weeks and spend time on the farm. And then it became permanent.
Yeah. I get it. Well, thank you for sharing, because I think that's really important that people know that it doesn't matter if it was a lifelong thing or a one time or a two-time thing. It
It,
impacts, it has the ability, I'm not going to say it does, but it has the ability to impact us. It does. And but
and it has the power that you give it over
mm,
you.
but we have to own
It's
it.
about process it.
Yeah, acknowledge it, process it, embrace what you've learned. What did you learn from it? Where are you going to look at that? When are you going to look at that? Are the things you learned healthy, or are they holding you back from being the authentic you that you want to be? And I know in the 28 days of self-care, you touch on so many beautiful areas of self-care that really relate a lot to what we're doing, what we're talking about today. And self-care starts with allowing some of that stuff to come up, come out, give it breath, give it air, so that it can go back to wherever it needs to be, so that you have the ability to be open and free. And that's what we all want. Authenticity equals freedom.
And trusting your feelings. Trusting that
Yes,
that your body doesn't lie to you. Because even if your mind will protect you by lying to you, your body won't.
that's right. That's right. That's why we talk about dealing with body, mind, spirit. And sometimes, the body shows up first, sometimes spirit shows up first, sometimes thoughts show up first. It doesn't matter. It's all one.
It
It's
is.
absolutely. Well, my love,
You?
so enjoyed being here today, and I love our cooperation with one another and what we do here. And I appreciate all the beautiful people that you've had on while I was on vacation.
You.
Um,
And I'm
so
glad
much,
it
but
had a happy ending. And it's not an
yes,
ending, it's a
a
continuation.
beginning.
It's
Yeah,
a beginning and a continuation on your
with
life,
my new family. Yeah,
family. That's
yeah.
your old family, your old new family. How do we
My
work?
old new family. Yeah, and that's another story we can talk about another time. We can talk about those kinds of things because people don't talk about them and we really need to sometimes.
We do. I'm going to send you a lot of love. And
Thank
by the way, this was episode 10. Can you believe it?
you. Yay! Oh my gosh. Moving forward. Okay.
Hopefully, we'll be seeing
Namaste.
you soon in person. So,
Yes, I look forward to that. Namaste, my love.
thank you, everyone, for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, leave them below the video. And if you need any assistance, you can always find us on Facebook or through Messenger, or you can even leave a message on YouTube and we will be in touch with you. Thank you.
Absolutely.